I'm just going to go ahead and clean up any parts that didn't come out quite perfectly. You can use a straight edge for that, just like your craft knife or whatever, and then a wood burner is invaluable for cleaning up things that are printed in flexible filament, and these are printed in cheetah, so it's black cheetah. It's really nice. It's very similar to the semi-flex. They're really, for these purposes, pretty much interchangeable, but just depending on the application, you can, choose which filament works best. I'm going to do my first test finish here. This is kind of experimenting, so I'm trying rub and buff on these. First of all, to see how well it sticks and whatnot, to see if it gives me kind of the metallic finish that I'm going for. So I've got some leftover rub and buff from the Edward Elric costume, so I'm trying both of those. I got a dark color and then that nice silver, so kind of mixing those together to make sort of a weathered metal finish and see how that goes. And it is sticking just fine to this, so there's no problems with adherence there. It does have a little bit of a strong smell that I'm not sure would be best for jewelry applications, but it's good to test it out. And then with the rub and buff, you want to just let it dry and then kind of buff it out with a damp cloth. Just spritz a little water, polish it out. It gives it just a tiny bit more sheen than it had before you do that. So that looks pretty nice, but I want to try some other methods. So I'm going to move over to acrylic paints, because acrylic paints plus these flexible filaments, it's a fantastic combination. It adheres really well. You just put a nice top coat over that and it makes a very durable finish. Like, that was a surprise when I figured that out. I didn't expect acrylic, something so simple and non-toxic, to be such a good finish for these flexible jewelry pieces. So I'm using a mix of light silver, kind of a medium silver, and then just black in there, and just playing around with it to get some different lights and darks. Experiment with this sort of metallic finish that's kind of darker around the edges, maybe kind of like it's cut out of steel or something. This one is looking a little bit boring though. I'm not sure about that. Probably going to go back in with some other colors. This is looking okay, but I think it needs a little more blending. It's looking a little bit more interesting, but I definitely like it better with more darkness around the edges. But then it starts looking a little blah if you overdo it, so you gotta go back in with the light. It's kind of a back and forth process, but it's nice to play around with. I'm going to call this one done. There it is in comparison to the rub and buff one. They look kind of similar, those two, so I'm going to try another option. Now this one I spray painted with a rattle can of silver spray paint first. Now I'm going over top of that with acrylics. The spray paint stuck just fine, and it seems like it's flexible enough on this. So I'm just going to kind of weather it out, make it a little more interesting, and kind of do more of a brushed metal effect on this one, I think. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to keep this one a little bit lighter because both of the other two turned up kind of dark. So I want to, experiment, try different finishes and see what works best with the chandelier and what might be best for jewelry. And I'm adding kind of a brown color in there. Really, it's this rusty orange that when you mix it with the black, it turns more brown. But I love this rusty orange color for adding a weathered look to things. If you use it full strength, it looks like rust. If you mix it in, it just looks like dirty grime. So it's nice and versatile. It's nice to have just a couple of colors you can mix together to get different effects. This is definitely looking different from the other ones, so I think it's good to have variety. We'll see which one ends up looking best with what I need them for. So lots of dirty, rusty colors on this one to kind of separate it from the others and have variety. I'm going to try another version now. It's going to be my last version, and this time I'm going to actually sand the piece, because on the previous ones I didn't sand them on top, I just smoothed out the edges. And I noticed in the final finish you could still see the print lines, which is fine. I want to kind of try it the other way and see if that looks better. So just going in with the Dremel with a pretty fine grit and sanding it smooth. It's really not too difficult to do. It doesn't add a whole lot of extra time, but I think it is going to give ultimately probably a better finish, a little bit more polished and a little bit more convincing for the kind of cut steel look that I want this one to have. Again, just smoothing it out with the wood burner, just taking care of any little bit of defining that needs to be done on those feathered edges of the Aes Sedai symbol. And now we're ready to paint this one. I'm going to skip the step of doing the spray paint on this one because I don't think it was really necessary. It didn't add anything other than just an extra step to have to do. So the acrylic paints stick just fine, especially after you have sanded it. They bond really, really well, so it's good adhesion. And I'm using a different brush here. I want to do more of a feathered look so that it kind of gives you more striations. I think it's going to look pretty much like steel when it's done. But again, there's a lot of playing around with these things. I'm really just experimenting here. So, it'll get too light and I'll add some dark. It'll get too dark, I'll add some light. There's not any set look that I'm going for. I'm just basically working with it until it looks good. Now it's time to grunge this one up a little bit. Again, using that rusty color and just kind of tapping some different striations on there. Give it lots of variation, especially around the edges, and then keep that brushed look more towards the center. And I'm going to rust it out even more, especially around those edges. Just dab on little bits of the rusty paint, kind of blend it in with your black in there. And it starts to look fairly realistic after you work with it a little bit. A lot like the same kind of method I was using on the Chandrai in parts. You really want to grunge it up, rust out those edges, make it look as metallic as possible, but without the weight of metal or the difficulty of cutting metal. And then also this is, indestructible, but it's not going to hurt something if you drop it on there because it doesn't actually have any sharp edges. So here's my 4 different versions, and they all look pretty good, but you can definitely see, that one's a little boring. The Rub and Buff one is just kind of a little bit too shiny almost, and it wasn't sanded, so it's a little bit rough. That one, I like the light colored one. I think that's going to go best with the Chandrai, and then the one that looks most like steel, that's going to look awesome for jewelry. So I'm going to go ahead and use those 2 moving forward. Now we need to seal all of these. Not so much the Rub and Buff one, really that's probably fine without sealing it. I'm not even sure if the sealer would stick that well because it's, not the same sort of formula at all. But this outdoor sealer, the plaid outdoor sealer, I love this for using the acrylic paints on flexible filaments and then topping it with this sealer. It's a fantastic combination. It's really quite durable, but it keeps its flexibility without cracking, and that's very important for these thin little models that can be bent, and they're so rubbery, they're so nice to wear because they're not sharp or heavy, but you do still, of course, want it to be durable. So I'm just going to brush that on in a light coat and then dab off any extra and hang them up from these metal hooks that I made out of some heavy gauge wire. They're great for hanging projects up while they dry, so I made a whole collection of them. And once each coat dries, you can just give it a second coat. Again, a light coat. You don't want to glob this on because it's going to look a little bit too cloudy and it might get lumpy, and it's just not necessary. It's plenty durable for these purposes with just 2 light coats. And then we just need to let everything dry before moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and just try the sealer on the Rub and Buff one. I think it's fine. I'm not sure it's really necessary, but maybe it'll seal in some of that odor from the Rub and Buff, which does fade eventually, I guess. Cool. Time to move on. So one of these is going to be for the Chandrai. I'm going to use the more light colored one that's got more rusty stuff over the top of it. That complements the Chandrai coloring the best. So we're going to use that for that. And I've got this beautiful, beautiful leather that I got from a store on Etsy. I can link them below if you want to shop there. But I've been getting all of my sheepskin leather from them, and it's just gorgeous. I like the more rustic finish type leather as opposed to kind of a shinier finish. Okay, so we're cutting a strip of leather, and I just cut it out from the edge because it already has kind of variations, darker and a little bit scraggly at those edges. So it's perfect for this because I want it to look like just this strap that was just cut off and tied on. Not a whole lot of planning or art to it, more just function. And like it's been there for a while. Everything looks cool weathered. So just kind of cutting it long enough to leave enough slack to tie it around and have some knots and bits dangling off and whatnot just to make it look cool. Now, even though this is kind of a rustic finish, it's not weathered enough for me. So I'm just using some acrylic paints. Just using some black, some brown, and this kind of like bluish navy color. Add a little water in there and just brush it on, especially around the edges, basically as if it's just gotten dirty, and you just rub it in with your hands until it looks kind of more grungy as opposed to you just cut it off of a fresh hide. Definitely gives it more character, and it's going to look appropriate with the weapon as opposed to looking separate or added on later. It looks really nice to have it especially dark on the edges, so I'm kind of really focusing on that area. And there it is together. So this guy is done. Let's tie him onto that Chandrai. I kind of just played around with the different knot orientation on this. It's, it's not a big deal, but still looks nice to kind of find an orientation that you can see it well when you're holding it, and then it just kind of looks natural there. It's pretty good, but I do want to add just a little bit more weathering in those knots to again look like it's been tied there for some time as opposed to I just tied it on today. Same thing, just use some black, that just whatever colors kind of look good with whatever you're putting it on to look grungy. And then also twist out those ends a little bit so they look, you know, worn. I say that too much, but it just looks better if it's all weathered together. And there it is. That one is finished. That fox head is going to hang on there with that chandelier. And we're going to move on to using that same design but a different finish to make some jewelry. For the jewelry portion, I've got this awesome brown hemp cord that I just got off Amazon. I'll link it below, but I've used this stuff a couple of times and I really like the hemp cord. It's nice, it's hefty enough, but without looking too chunky. And I'm going to use another type of leather that I had from the same store on Etsy. It's, again, really beautiful. A little bit less variation on it, more of a smooth, solid type finish, but it's going to look really good with this hemp cord. I'm making a little pattern because the goal here is to make a couple of clasps that are going to slide. So this can be an adjustable necklace, so you can have it long, or you can pull everything tight and make it more of a choker style. So I need 2 of these little clasps per necklace. And then I'm just going to use this little tool to add some stitching marks to where the stitching is going to be added, and then use a punch to pre-punch those holes so that the cord goes through nice and easy. And there's some beautiful holes. So we're just going to grab some waxed thread for the actual stitching. This is really nice because once it's done, you can kind of hit it with the soldering iron a little bit, or with the wood burner, and it kind of melts everything together, and it also just looks really cool. And then just trim those ends off. It looks nice and neat, and it's securely fastened. So now we're going to fold that down. And those 2 edges are where the threads are going to pass through. But this is just a little bit too long, so I'm going to trim that down a little bit closer to the stitching. And then, like I said, it's really cool to just burn that a little bit, and it melts everything securely so those ends aren't going to come up. Now I've got this long piece of the hemp cord. I'm going to first of all just fasten it here to the Foxhead medallion, make sure that's all good. Now we need to thread one side through each of the clasps. We're going to keep them to the side and then thread them back through each other's also in just a second. But first, I'm going to go ahead and stitch those in place. So I'm going to cut some more holes, sew that up so that the thread stays on its own side. And then, of course, secure the ends, trim everything off, and kind of burn it on there a little bit to make sure those ends don't come unraveled. Now we're going to thread each of those ends through the opposite clasp so that they can slide together. And we need to secure those loose ends with a knot and some glue. So we're just going to put a knot and then a little bit of contact adhesive in here. Dab it on the knot, and then also going to dab it into the pocket of the leather where it's not going to make the other piece stick down because the other side needs to slide freely. We do want that to stay securely fastened on its own side. And then we need to stitch that side down also. We got to do that same process for the other side, threading it through, using a knot to secure it, and then we're going to stitch that down. Get those edges nice and melty with the thread so they're held down well and they look cool. I'm also going to burn out that leather a little bit on any edges that look a little bit too freshly cut. And now they slide nicely, so this is now an adjustable cord. The cord is looking just a little bit too fresh at the base there where it's attached to the medallion, so I'm going to use some of the same acrylic paints just to dab it on there as a little bit of grungy dirt to make it look weathered like everything else. And then dab off any extra. And the same thing for the edges of the leather. They look a little bit too fresh, but the edges of this particular leather don't burn too well with the wood burner, so I'm just using some of the paint to get the same effect. Make sure everything still slides properly, and there they are. The clasps are all done, so you can wear it either as more of a choker if you tighten everything up. A side note on this, now I did try a hammered metal finish spray paint, and that didn't work. First, it was tacky for at least a week. Once it finally wasn't tacky, you bend it and it just cracks. If you compare that to the acrylic paint versions, they're fine bending, they don't crack at all. The very first version I did of this Foxhead medallion was a little bit rough. I tried using the engraving tip for the Dremel to kind of cut out the shape of the foxhead, and it didn't work so well. I did also start out with a paper drawing before I went to 3D design. I kind of work better figuring out ideas and whatnot on paper rather than just digitally, so I usually will start out with a pen and paper, or pencil even if I'm feeling really unsure. But working digitally, it does give you the opportunity to kind of really nicely refine it. And that's it. This project's done. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and do that now. I'm going to have links to any supplies below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
A little bright. Ah. Okay. Getting bright again.